This is the United States of America. And this is Chicago. And this, well, this is one of the USA's busiest airports, Chicago O'Hare International. But it wasn't always O'Hare International. In fact, it wasn't always an airport. Well, it was, but it wasn't. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, come on, tell us. Was it an airport or not? Why is it called O'Hare Airport? And why does the USA act like the bald eagle demonstrates a symbol of superiority when it's actually one of the smallest eagles in the world? Look, I don't have all the answers. But what I do know is a lot about Chicago Airport. So let's begin, shall we? Okay, so let's start by figuring out how it all began. And for that, we're travelling all the way back to the year 1942, when the aerodrome that is now one of the busiest in the USA was actually an airfield factory that was used to produce the mighty Douglas C-54 Skymasters during World War II. So, while it may not have begun as a civilian airport, it sure turned out to. Hang on a sec. Is that? Huh. Well, folks, it seems that we can answer both questions at once here. You see, this is Lieutenant Commander Edward Butch O'Hare, and his incredible bravery in World War II earned him an airport named after him. Okay, so, what happened after the Second World War ended? Well, Douglas's military contract had ended, meaning that they no longer needed the factory that was built there. And the result of this explains something very interesting about this airport. You see, IATA has a 3-letter code assigned to each international airport around the world, right? And these codes generally follow a pattern of common sense. For instance, Melbourne is MEL, Auckland is AKL, London Heathrow is LHR, you get the idea. Yet, for some reason, Chicago O'Hare Airport's IATA code is ORD. This is because Chicago Airport was originally known as Orchard Field Airport following the withdrawal of Douglas after World War II, hence the IATA code ORD. Which brings us to 1945, immediately following the end of World War II, when the mayor of Chicago, Edward Kelly, got the boys together to decide where to start building a new civilian airport to prepare for the future aviation demand. After a couple of beers, they decided that Orchard Field Airport would be the home for the future of Chicago aviation. So, in March of 1946, the Chicago Formal Aviation Board acquired as much of the Orchard Field site from the federal US government as they could. A man named Ralph H. Burke was charged with designing the civilian airport that would be built on the site. And the master plan that he came up with was filled with ideas that at the time were considered, well, different. You see, he wanted to build the first ever split-finger terminals that would essentially have a long terminal building with concourses protruding from the sides that house the gates for the aircraft. This terminal method would later be named piers. Burke also wanted the airport to include underground refueling, railway access to connect the airport to the city, as well as direct access to the local highway. All great ideas, but to top it all off, Chicago was about to become world leading. So, have you ever walked down one of these things? Well, guess which airport was the first to ever use them? That's right. The world's first ever jet bridge was used at Chicago's new O'Hare Airport. Now, remember how I said that as much of the land at Orchard Field was bought as possible? That's because the US military retained a small portion of the aerodrome, as well as the exclusive right to use up to a quarter of the land if needed, free of cost. Cost of doing business, am I right? Anyway, as it happens, this would mean that O'Hare's aerodrome would be used for military purposes once again during the Korean War from 1950 to 1959, serving as an active fighter base. Then in 1955, O'Hare opened up to civilian passenger services with the intent to show off its shiny new airport building. But, as it happens, in 1955, Chicago's primary port for civilian travel was another airport called Midway International Airport. No, not that Midway. This one. Yeah, so in 1955, when O'Hare officially opened, they only dealt with 36 routes. And considering that the airport cost $25 million, or $250 million in today's money, this wasn't exactly the level of business that O'Hare was hoping for. But this was actually because their neighbour at Midway was actually the world's busiest airport in the year 1955, handling 414 departures a day. After extensive research, it was determined that airlines didn't want to fly in and out of O'Hare, and here's why. You know that direct highway access that old mate Ralph had planned for? Yeah, well, it hadn't been built yet. What's more is that the one terminal that had been built was being used for both international and domestic flights, which, as O'Hare was about to learn, was not too appealing to international airlines. So finally, in 1957, O'Hare realised the issues and began to fix them. They completed a project to provide direct highway access, as well as adding a dedicated international terminal, expanded parking areas, and a bunch more aircraft hangars and maintenance facilities, all of which were completed by 1960. Then, over the following 3 years, like seagulls to a chip, airlines began establishing international routes in astounding numbers. But believe it or not, after all of the expansions and additions to O'Hare, the real reason the business started to move from Midway to O'Hare was something that had been established all along. You see, in 1957, Boeing revolutionized the aviation industry with this bad boy, the 707. It quickly became the most popular jetliner on the market, but it required something that Midway did not have, a long runway. And what did O'Hare have? A big, long runway capable of handling the 707. So just like that, O'Hare inherited an insane amount of business. So much business, in fact, that in 1962, every single airline route was shifted from Midway to Chicago, and suddenly O'Hare was now the new world's busiest airport. Aha! Look who's busiest now. So busy that in 1964, they processed more than 10 million passengers, and then the very next year, in 1965, they doubled that number, processing more than 20 million passengers. O'Hare would also retain the title of world's busiest airport until 1998. Then in the 1970s, Chicago added their new traffic control tower, 5,000 more parking spaces, new security checkpoints, a brand new flash hotel, and, believe it or not, a 7th runway. Now, the next era of O'Hare's history came following the US Airline Deregulation Act in the 1980s. I've made a video on this, so if you'd like the full context around this, follow the prompt in the top corner now. So yes, the Airline Deregulation Act was passed in 1978, leading to wide industry change and evolution throughout the USA. What came next was a battle of the airlines. Two airlines in particular that are now two of the largest airlines in the world were at the center of the fight for the US air travel market: United Airlines and American Airlines. Their continued growth meant that there was less and less business available for long-time airline customers of O'Hare, such as Trans World Airlines and Northwest Airlines. In 1981, Trans World Airlines was losing around $25 million a year, so to save money and consolidate their business, they made the tough decision to move their hub operations out of O'Hare to St. Louis Airport. Shortly after, Northwest Airlines was having the same issue and made the same choice to move their hub operations from O'Hare to Minneapolis. United and American Airlines saw these moves and said, "Thank you very much," both quickly moving to establish long-term hubs of operations at O'Hare that are still both in operation today. Okay, so, you know that one guy in all of those mob movies that's always like, if you can't beat him, join him? The kind of guy that survives by adapting through staying alongside the people with the most power. Well, Delta Airlines was that guy. As American and United began to dominate the US air travel market, Delta switched up strategies by joining... Whoa, Tom. Look a bit further down the script. Huh? Delta business... Oh, okay, scratch that. Delta suffered the exact same fate as Trans World Airlines and Northwest. The only difference is that they managed to hold on a bit longer before pulling the plug. Alright, now on to the big boys. In 1984, United provided enough business to O'Hare to call the shots on some of its development decisions. So, they had the original Terminal 1 demolished, with a shiny new Terminal of Tomorrow built in its place and opened in 1987. American did something similar, renovating and adding to their existing facilities in Terminal 3. When Terminal 1 was demolished, United weren't the only airline to operate out of it. In fact, a large number of other international airlines also used the terminal. And in 1987, when the new Terminal 1 was completed, United said, "Thanks, we'll take it from here," and took the entire terminal for themselves. The result of this was that Terminal 4 had to accommodate a lot more airlines and aircraft, while a new Terminal 5 for these airlines was built. Terminal 5 was completed and opened in 1993, much to the delight of some airlines who weren't happy with the standing arrangements. Seriously, Terminal 4 was so packed that they actually turned the basement of the airport car park into a makeshift terminal extension. All was running smoothly at O'Hare, or at least that's what it seemed like. The airport was extremely busy, and it was only getting more busy as time went by. Suddenly in 1989, flights began to become delayed, and as the next 4 years went by, more and more flights became delayed. It was becoming a major issue, so an investigation was opened into the delays in the hope that the reason for the delays could be determined. The investigation took 8 years to come to a conclusion, with the findings being handed over in 2001. It turns out that O'Hare had a poorly designed runway layout. Basically, the number of aircraft movements per day was severely hindered due to either intersecting runways or air traffic management. Literally within months, the Chicago Department of Aviation created the O'Hare Modernization Plan. The plan was for a $6.6 billion upgrade that would completely transform the runway configuration. It took 4 years to be given FAA approval, but in 2005, it was official and works began to sort of just redo everything. 4 new runways were built and 2 existing runways were extended. How many runways does this airport have? The reconfiguration became a cause for concern for both Chicago locals and environmental lobbyists. Both groups expressed their concerns around noise pollution, which resulted in a 6-year-long legal battle between Chicago residents and the city of Chicago that was eventually resolved in 2011. The result was that work was allowed to go ahead unimpeded and unchanged, with the final runway being completed in 2020 and the final runway extension still under construction at current, expected to be finished by the end of 2021. So where does that leave us here in 2021? Well, right now, Chicago O'Hare Airport has 4 terminals, Terminals 1, 2, 3 and 5. 4 was shut down following the transition of international airlines from 4 to 5 in 1993. O'Hare has the most runways of any civilian airport in the entire world. 8 runways. I mean, look at this. That's got to make for some challenging air traffic control work. O'Hare also has a large cargo operations facility to the south of the airport between 2 runways. Oh, also, as it turns out, planes aren't the only flying thing that O'Hare allowed to land. As of 2011, O'Hare established a large apiary that takes over 1 million bees. That's pretty cool. So now that we're up to date, let's have a look at what's in store for the future of O'Hare. In 2018, United, American and the City of Chicago came together to discuss a plan for the redevelopment of the airport's terminal area. The plan is to streamline operations for airlines by allowing international to domestic transfers within the same terminal. A new terminal is to be built that will act as an alliance hub, which basically means that all the airlines that are best mates with each other can share a terminal together to make their operations more efficient. This will be the first of its kind in the world. If it works, it could mean that major airports around the world will be adding One World and Star Alliance hubs, as well as hubs for other alliances depending on region. The new terminal development will include concourse terminals and will have state-of-the-art top-of-the-line facilities in every category. Customs, security, amenities, retail, hospitality, you get the idea. The entire plan will cost an estimated $8.5 billion and is scheduled to be completed by 2028, just in time for the Los Angeles Olympics. I guess they're hoping to cash in on all of those cross-continent travelers heading towards the Olympics. Now, it's disappointing to say this, but sadly O'Hare does not have much in the way of environmental planning or development. Most of the airports that I cover here on the channel have dedicated departments that make it their mission to reduce emissions and lower the environmental impact across their airport. But Chicago stands out to me as an airport that has not dedicated enough resources to combat the growing need for environmental care. And that is Chicago O'Hare Airport from start to finish. As always, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like to help YouTube promote my content. If my videos interest you, please consider subscribing. See you in the next video, and as always, have a great week.